morning. Today is Tuesday. We are on Teres Menachem Sefer HaMamorim Tovshin Yud Aleph Tovshin Yud Beis. In the Maimer of Bosi Lgani Tovshin Yud Beis on page Reish Gimel at the bottom. We're up to the word Vihine, the full stop. So this is basically the Rebbe's Maimer Bosi Lgani in the famous series of Bosi Lgani Ma'amorim. And the Rebbe here is focusing in on Ois Beis, the second chapter of Bosi Lgani. As mentioned yesterday, that every year the Rebbe would explain another Ois, another chapter of Bosi Lgani, of the previous Rebbe's Bosi Lgani. Starting from Tovshin Yud Aleph, where he explained chapter 1 of the previous Rebbe's Bosi Lgani. And in every following year he would explain, he would focus in on the next Perek. There are 20 chapters in the original Bosi Lgani, in the series of the original four Mamorim. So this is Tovshin Yud Beis, and he's focusing in on aspects of chapter 2. So he began by discussing the idea of Bosi Lgani, that Hashem says, I've come to my garden, meaning to the place where I, Hashem, was present originally. Where is that? In this low realm. When originally? At creation, before the sin of the tree of knowledge and the sins that followed, which all caused the pushing away and the distancing of the Shekhinah from the earth, from one removal following another removal. And then there were 7 tzaddikim that drew the Shekhinah back down from the highest realms down back to this physical world, and that culminated through Moshe Rabbeinu and mainly in the Beis HaMikdash. And this idea of the Beis HaMikdash, the Rebbe said, bringing the Shekhinah, making the Shekhinah present in the Beis HaMikdash, is not only in the physical Beis HaMikdash, but also in the Mikdash and the temple that exists within each and every Jew. As it says in the Pasuk, also the Mikdash v'shechanti b'seicham. The verse says, make for me a temple and I will dwell in them. So the Pirush HaPnimi, the inner meaning of this dwelling in them, is not only in the multitude of the temples that stood, but it means in the temple that exists within each and every Jew. That each and every Jew has to cause Hashem's Shekhinah to be present within him, as it was originally before the sins of Adam and the people that followed him, and even more, to make it even more present than it was originally. And through this, man causes there to be a dira b'tachtenim, a dwelling place for Hashem in the lowest realms. Now the Rebbe goes in and focuses in on the main aspects of the service that took place in the temple, continuing with the metaphor of the temple and how that reflects in the temple within each and every Jew. The last word on page Reish Gimel. V'hinei, and now on the top of page Reish Dalet. One of the main services that took place in the temple, the Avodas HaKorbanos, was the service of the sacrificial offerings. Now that of course was a physical act with physical animals and physical substances. However, Shehi Aved Ruchnis, but what it is it's a symbol, and what it symbolizes is a spiritual, but it really and innately, what is it? It's a spiritual service. And not only is it a spiritual service in the sense of the temple that each and every person needs to make within themselves, but also in the actual temple that stood in Jerusalem, although these were physical acts, but really what they symbolized and what was behind them, the inner dimension of them, was a spiritual service. Also the service of the sacrificial offerings that took place, that was performed in the temple, where they actually brought as an offering a physical animal. This too was a spiritual service. What's the proof that there is a spiritual dimension to this service? And in fact, the main aspect of it is something spiritual. Proof of this is the proof of this is from the participation of the Kohanim, the priests, in their service, the aspect of their service in the sacrificial offerings, and the Levites in their song and in their music. Whilst the korban was brought, whilst the sacrificial offering was brought. Sheheim inyanim ruchnim. Their contribution was, or contained, or possessed a spiritual dimension. As the Zohar states, the kahani b'chashoi u'beru'usa de liba. The function of the kohanim, or rather the way the kohanim performed, the way the priests performed their made their contribution in the process of the sacrificial offering. It was silently and with the feeling of the heart, which is the idea of hamshacha, drawing down the godliness from above to below. Ulevim, and the Levites, the Levim, their contribution, the way they performed, their participation in the service of bringing the sacrificial offerings was b'shira v'zimra, with song and with music. Shehu inyan ha'ala mil mata l'mayla, which is the idea of raising up the spiritual energies that exist below to lift them up above. There's a long piece in the Zohar in Parshas Shmini where he discusses the idea of the after the two sons of Aaron were burnt by the fire that came out from Hashem after they brought the Ketores. So Hashem instructs Aaron that he should instruct that he and his children, that Kohanim, are prohibited from drinking wine when they perform the service in the temple. And he goes into a whole discussion why. And he explains that Kohanim, the service of the Kohanim, is silently, which is from the right side, meaning that we know that in the kavim, in the various lines that exist in the celestial divine attributes, there's kava yamin, kava small, the right side, there's the left side. So kohanim are related to chokhmah, kohanim are related to chesed, kohanim are related to netzach, which is the right side, and that is silent, whereas because chesed is explains it in the Zohar there, and also the Mittel Rebbe and the Tzemach Tzedek explain it in other parts of Chassidus, that Chesed, that the Kaveh Yamin, the right side, is connected to water, to silence, to oil, and to water, and whereas Levim are related to the left side, Bina, Gvura, and Hoid, and are therefore related more to the idea of wine. So be that as it may, Kohanim are the idea of lifting up, raising up the energies from below up above, and the Levim, their contribution was to draw down the divine energy from above to below. I'm sorry, the other way around. The Kohanim are the idea of drawing down the divine energies from above. Chesed is the idea of giving. Levim is the idea of gvura, the idea of withholding, and the idea of lifting. So therefore, the bottom line is that the service of the Kohanim and the Levim, their contribution was a spiritual one. Therefore, this denotes that even the service of the sacrificial offerings in the temple, although we brought a physical animal, nevertheless, it is actually what is behind it. What does it symbolize? It's a symbol of a spiritual service, which is really the idea behind the whole concept of bringing a physical sacrificial offering. So, and even more so, the idea of the sacrificial offerings, as it is within each and every individual Jew, in the temple that each and every Jew, each and every person possesses, that is certainly a spiritual service. And that is why, that is also why, in the beginning, when the Torah begins to describe in Parshas Vayikra, the idea of, where it describes the idea of bringing karbanos, bringing sacrificial offerings, it says there, Adam ki yakev mikem karban lavaya, a person who will bring from you a offering to Hashem. Now, grammatically, it should have said, Adam ki yakev, Adam mikem, a person from you, a person from among you, ki yakev karban lavaya, who will bring an offering to Hashem. Why does it say Adam ki yakev mikem karban lavaya, a person who will bring from you a karban to Hashem? That seems to denote that the karban, that the sacrificial offering, is of you and from you. In other words, you are bringing yourself or part of you as an offering to Hashem. And it is known, the Alter Rebbe's interpretation of this verse, he points out, grammatically, it would have made more sense if it would have said, a person from among you who will bring an offering to Hashem. Why then does it say a person who will offer from you, which, as mentioned, seems to denote that the offering is of you and from you? That indeed this is the case. The Alter Rebbe explains that this is the explanation. A person who will offer, when a person comes and wants to become close to godliness, this is the idea of bringing a sacrificial offering. What is the idea of a sacrificial offering? As it says in Sefer HaBoyer, why is it called korban? Why is a sacrificial offering called with the word korban? Korban, the root of the word korban is karev, being close. Ella, the explanation is, mipnei shemekarev, the idea of korban is that it brings close. What does it bring close? What's the idea of korban? Bringing close what? Or whom? To what? Or to whom? The korban is inyan kiruv hakoyches v'achoshim. The idea of a sacrificial offering is, to bring close the powers and the faculties and the abilities and the talents of the person, meaning to say that a person brings himself closer to Hashem. So when a person wants to bring his abilities, his faculties close to Hashem, wants to become close to godliness, hare mikem korban lahavaya, then from you the offering has to be to Hashem. What does that mean? Ir darft makriv sein von eich allein. You have to sacrifice from you alone, meaning to say that actually the korban, the sacrificial offering, is of you and from you. To elaborate more, just like in the metaphor of the actual physical bringing of the sacrificial offering in the physical sense. How is that performed? You take a living and whole animal, and you slaughter it. What does it mean when you slaughter the animal? When you shech the animal? The idea is that one takes out from the animal, its life, its energy. And after that, one brings onto the mizbeach, onto the altar, the imurim, the insides of the animal. That the fat is burnt on the fire, which was on the altar. Even more than this, when we talk about the sacrificial offering, which was called oila, which was completely consumed on the mizbeach. Haschalas karbanos, which is the beginning of all karbanos. When the Torah begins to describe the various karbanos that are brought in the temple, it begins with karban oila. Shehu, what is the idea of a karban oila? Shehu oila called ilah mizbeach. Why is it called oila? Oila means it goes up, because it goes up completely on the mizbeach, meaning to say that in a karban oila, unlike other karbanos, it is totally, unlike other sacrificial offerings, this one is totally burnt. All of it is burnt on the mizbeach, on the altar. So so too. What is the metaphor? How does this metaphor play itself out in the spiritual dimension, in the person's sacrificial service to Hashem? So too it is in the service of the sacrificial offerings in the spiritual sense. That first, when one wants to bring oneself closer to Hashem, one has to make sure that his animal is whole. What does that mean? Just like in the temple, before we brought a sacrificial offering onto the mizbeach, onto the altar, it had to be checked that it had no blemishes. So too a person, when he wants to come close to Hashem, has to check that his animal has no blemishes and is whole. Hainu, one needs to check oneself. To make sure that the animal that's within him is shlema, is whole. What is the animal that's within him? Also his body and his animal soul. A person needs to check that it is whole. And we'll soon see what that means. And this checking, this inspection has to be done properly. He has to concentrate on it. And not in the form of the precepts of people that are learned, meaning to say by rote. Don't do it just as by the way, and just by routine, as something that has to be done, but it has to be keep it because if one does it just in that mode, in such a way, it will not be a proper and sufficient checking. When one knows that this matter is something which is so important to him that it is a question of life, a life question, then one checks oneself in all the corners of his soul, in his intellect, and in his emotional faculties, particularly with particular attention to the three garments of machshava dibur ma'aseh, thought, speech, and action. The oz, when a person inspects himself in his spiritual consciousness, to see in the spiritual sense, to see what's going on with his, where he is in his thought, speech, and action, and in his emotions and in his intellect. Oz yeda, then he will know kol inyonav hadrushim tikun, all his matters that necessitate fixing and correction. And since this matter is something which is so important to him that it's a life question, therefore when one comes to the conclusion and the results of his inspection is that certain things need correction, he will do and perform them in actuality, the corrections that are necessary, so that he has no blemishes. So this is the idea of the inspection that had to be performed. Just like in the temple, the animal had to be inspected to make sure that it has no blemishes and that it is whole. So too, a person, before he brings himself closer to Hashem, he wants to bring himself as an offering to Hashem, has to make sure that he has no blemishes and that he's whole. This is the idea, as explained in Chassidus, of Sur Merah, moving away from the negative. This is not yet a person bringing himself as an offering. This is just the preparation to remove himself from negative behaviors and from negative experiences in order that he should be fit to be an offering to come close to Hashem. So that's stage one. After the person checks himself in the manner prescribed above, then he'll become acceptable to be a carbon to come close to Hashem. That he can bring himself and shecht himself, as it were, as a carbon to Hashem. Hainu, Shabbos. What's the idea of when an animal is slaughtered? Hainu, even after the energy and the life force is removed from the animal, taken away from the animal. Hainu Shabbos b'chul nishur b'shleimus. The flesh, etc., the animal remains whole. El l'shamoitzi mimeno achayis. He removes from it the energy. So what does that mean in the spiritual service of man to Hashem? It means one removes the life, the energy that one invests in physical matters. It means that the physical matter remains. However, one uses them he uses them only to the extent and for the purpose of having additional energy and strength in order to serve Hashem. As our sages explain in the Talmud, that wine and a good scent causes the person to become wiser. It opens up the mind, it opens up the faculties. And one of the sages said that as long as he hasn't eaten, because he hasn't eaten meat of an ox, I did not accurately focus on the reason for the halachic matter that was being discussed, the concept that was being discussed. So what are we talking about? So we're talking about using physical phenomena for the purpose of adding energy and serving Hashem. This is even in matters that are permissible matters. Particularly when it comes to matters of mitzvah. For example, consuming food, eating on Shabbos and Yom Tov, when it's a mitzvah to eat, for example, when we fashion tzitzis and we wear tzitzis from physical wool, Tefillin miklaf gashmi, and we wear tefillin, we make tefillin, and we don't tefillin that are made from physical parchment. Hainu dvorim gashmim, these are physical matters, physical physical things. She'osim behem atzma mitzvah, with which we perform a mitzvah. So this is that these actual things are transformed into something holy. Not only the instruction that we have that Hashem, that we are instructed that we should know Hashem in all our ways. In other words, not only our general behavior should be in a way that is dedicated to serving Hashem, but we're talking about even more so when we take physical matters and we actually transform them into objects of mitzvah. So all of this is the idea of avodas hakarbanos in the spiritual sense. All of this is the idea of the sacrificial offering in the temple that exists within each and every Jew. This is the idea of serving Hashem through sacrificial offering within the temple that exists within each and every person, to remove the energy, to extract the energy from physical things, from physical matter, meaning to say that you should remove the energy from the physical matter, and to use it only for the purpose of serving Hashem. The oz, for then, whom mikem korban. Then that is going back to the original question of the Alter Rebbe and his answer. Why does it say odom ki yakriv mikem? That a person who wants to wants to bring a sacrificial offering from you is a korban to Hashem. And the Alter Rebbe pointed out that grammatically it should have said odom mikem ki yakriv. So he explains no, because the pasuk means to hint over here concerning to point out the service of Hashem in the form of in the form of sacrificial offerings from within the person himself. The oz, when a person behaves in this way, humikem korban, then indeed the offering is from you, fun eichalein, from you yourself. B'kasher ha'odom makriv mikem korban, and when a person indeed brings an offering from himself, oz korban lahavaya, then he becomes an offering for Hashem, which means the person becomes close and becomes united with Hashem himself. So this is the idea of korban in the spiritual sense, and the temple that exists within each and every person. And then in the next chapter, the Rebbe is going to focus on the fact that if a person contemplates where he exists, what his spiritual condition is, how could he begin to become close to Hashem? That'll be continued the Mitzvah Hashem in chapter 2, which will be tomorrow, which is, I believe, bank holiday. However, lahavdil, it is Rosh Chodesh. No, sorry, Rosh Chodesh is Thursday. So Shachris tomorrow is 8:15. So Mitzvah Hashem will be at 7:30.